All right, page 100. The Great Pyramid. 1. Hidden entrance, door in the stone. 2. Al Mamun's entrance and tunnel. 3. Ascending passage discovered by Al Mamun. 4. Passage to Queen's Chamber. 5. Queen's Chamber, Chamber of Angelic Inheritance. 6. Grand Gallery. 7. King's Chamber, Chamber of Mankind's Inheritance. 8. Observation shafts, air shafts. 9. Descending passage, known to many ancient nations. 10. Subterranean chamber. 11. Original limestone casing blocks. 12. Current outer surface of exposed blocks. 13. Missing cornerstone. Hold on. 14. Well pit. My eyes. Ah. Drywall. Dust. Forgive me. Ah. On the southern face of the king's chamber is a small shaft like a telescopic tube cut precisely through 200 feet of stone through scores of courses of limestone blocks. The ingenuity required for this laser precision shaft defies the imagination when considering the fact that the shaft was cut into the blocks before they were laid in place and not after the courses of blocks were set. This makes these blocks especially difficult to fashion, their architects seemingly inhuman. Today, only lasers could replicate this feat. Archaeoastronomers claim that this shaft was originally designed to pinpoint the three belt stars of Orion, Alnitak, Saiph, and Rigel. Orion was a type of messianic figure to the ancients. The oldest rendering of the epithet is Urion, meaning drawn from the water. Orion was the coming prince, and as a constellation, it is the most brilliant in the heavens. It has become a very Damn, hold on. I go rub my eyes, I rub stuff in them. Ah, yeah, too bad. You wait, it gives you a little more time to look at the words. Where was I? Orion was the coming prince, and as a constellation, it is the most brilliant in the heavens. It has become a very popular theory that the three largest pyramids at Giza, the Great Pyramids, are aligned geometrically to match the three belt stars of Orion's belt. Perhaps the theory is older than we think. The Arabian writer Eden Ben Yahya long ago wrote that each of the Gizean monuments was consecrated to a star. 46. Opposite the shaft in the king's chamber is the one extending from the antechamber and points into the northern heavens at the ancient pole star, Alpha Draconis, or the Eye of the Dragon. Alpha Draconis is far from the zodiacal constellations, 47, and it appears to be lording over all the other stars because it was the celestial pivot, a star that did not move as the rest of the starry host slowly revolved around it. When entering the antechamber, one must turn around looking behind them to see the shaft. Since 1859, several attempts have been made by serious researchers to demonstrate that the internal architectural measurements of the Great Pyramid are an encoded timeline of the history and future of the world. Unfortunately, not one of these men had an exact chronology to work with, and some manipulated historical dates to confirm two internal rectilinear measurements within the monuments to fit their preconceptions into their design. Others did not have exact architectural measurements so that their dates did not matter anyways. These men were driven with a passion to exhibit this phenomenon because they were inspired to know it by intuition, by the spirit, but not its particulars. For any who disbelieve that this Enochian superstructure is in fact a gigantic prophetic calendar of the world, then they must read Chronotexture Lost Science of Prophetic Engineering, which shows in multitudes of charts the awe-inspiring fact that these descending passages, subterranean chambers, well pit, ascending passage, queen chamber, grand gallery, antechamber, and king's chamber have all been accurately scientifically measured in minute detail, and that these measurements conform exactly to the rectilinear timeline we call world history. The Great Pyramid, a three-dimensional calendar of the future. But besides We are now over 48 centuries into its prophetic chronology. We can easily see in retrospect how definitively perfect these arrangements are. By turning backward, one looks into the past. This is what one must do to see the shaft formerly hidden in the antechamber. To the ancient mindset, one looked into the past if they looked backwards. This was the chief trespass of Lot's wife when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, though they were spared as a family despite the fact that the inhabitants were left behind to die a fiery fate. She disobeyed the command to turn backward to see the cities as they were destroyed. She could not let go of the past. Her body was burned so fast as she stood in a field of salt from the Dead Sea that she mineralized, turned into an instant fossil composed of salt crystal, as organic tissue was replaced with minerals absorbed from the environment. Hebraic records found at this location among the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Book of Enoch refer to Azazel, an evil archangel that before the flood was guilty of polluting the heavens for inducing men on earth. Die, little bastard. To see that which is behind them. This infers that the dark angel appeared to ancient men and taught them the forbidden knowledge and science that caused the ruin of former generations. This belief is traced back as far as the 3rd millennium BC among the Akkadians, preceded only by the Sumerians. The Akkadians claimed that humanity was originally blameless until tempted by the dragon of the deep, 48. Prior to this deception, the dragon was the divinely appointed keeper of time, epicenter of starry motion, and inside the dragon constellation was the eye of the dragon, the antediluvian pole star, 49. There are Hebrew traditions that link Azel to another name, Shemyaza, who was judged by Orion and eternally bound for revealing the name of God to mortal women, 50. As will be seen, these traditions are also linked to the secrets of the Great Pyramid. In the most primitive and remote cultures around the world, the dragon was noted long ago to be the appointed guardian and keeper of hidden treasures on the mountain of the gods, the mount that interchanges with the tree, 51. The dragon archaically symbolizes divine kingship, 52, and this concept is as old as Sumer and Babylonia. After the Diluvian disaster, it became a prevalent tradition which was carried all around the world. The Aztec mural excavated from Teotihuacan with the dragon with a large eye hovering over the two trees is merely one of thousands of examples of this idea spread throughout antiquity. In Genesis, we find the beginning of the dragon as a serpent that deceived mankind, a serpent that as a terrestrial king becomes a dragon with 7 heads towards the last days end of the dragon's reign. Probably the oldest recorded story of the dragon before the deluge was discovered upon tablets in the famous Assyrian library of Ashurbanipal, 53. He was also called the Twisted Serpent because of its snake-like appearance in the heavens, a string of stars forming the Draco constellation, which was even mentioned in the ancient book of Job, 54. The importance of the dragon ended with the flood because of the planetary change. Our axis pointed at Alpha Draconis prior to the deluge, but after the global catastrophe ended, the survivors noticed immediately that there was a whole new starry order and that the dragon had fallen. Now the axis had shifted and pointed at the Great Bear, Ursa Major, which was the new pole star. The flood that destroyed the world's civilizations was by no means a mere flooding of the land, it was a worldwide cataclysm. Though this book cannot cover all the details and literature concerning the tragic end-time event in ancient humanity's past, here is a very concise summary of what occurred. The full accounts are in this author's works entitled When the Sun Darkens and Descent of the Seven Kings. About the same time that a large star appeared moving in the heavens with a tail that looked like a divine sword, earthquakes shook the cities of the world. For 7 days and nights, the people of the earth beheld the approaching sword and brilliant star as the foundations under their feet cracked and the animals became erratic and violent. Volcanoes erupted and pillars of fire shot high into the air and rained ash. The earth trembled unceasingly, and entire mountain ranges sprang up as new river systems appeared in days and lakes vanished or others appeared overnight. Whole cities were disintegrated and sunk below the shaking ground, while land masses were thrust upwards, while others buckled and were buried under new coastlines. It began raining and never stopped. The animals traveled in wild packs, domesticated animals maddened, attacking their masters and children. As the tail of the gigantic burning star enveloped the sky, the entire sun dimmed to a dark brown orb barely seen as flames burned across the sky, and plasma in the upper atmosphere caused a spectacular display of lightning bolts that scattered across the darkened sky in the daytime and struck the earth in thousands of places. As the passing comet or planetary fragment entered into a full transit between the sun and earth, the daytime sky blackened like night. The stars appeared in the daytime. The moon turned the color of blood, and gigantic rocks fell from the sky. One particularly whole region we know as the Gulf of Mexico became the burning impact crater. The shock wave literally took apart the entire Western Hemisphere. The center of Sethite civilization sank below the rising tides and was buried under 40 days of rainfall. The mighty Gihon River, raging against a land once fertile, covered in woods, we call Egypt. The Giza Plateau, bearing the Great Pyramid, suffered subsidence of the entire shelf and was plunged into the depths of the sea we know as the southern Mediterranean, where it would remain at the bottom for 340 years. The violent current during this year-long inundation underwater severely damaged the Sphinx and caused deep water erosion that the pyramids encased in facing blocks did not suffer. This water erosion is the source of the erroneous theory propagated today that the Sphinx is older than the pyramids. A year later, the world was a colder place of glacial sheets miles high, covering the upper northern and southern polar regions, extending southward and northward for thousands of miles beyond the Arctic and Antarctic circles. The world was filled with mudslides, sinkholes, meltwater seas that created vast freshwater lakes. The world continued to settle as decomposing bodies of billions of life forms were compressed under millions of tons of earth. The entire buried land surfaces with broken forests and their occupants formed immense coal deposits and graveyards of pre-flood life forms, and flora were burned by pressure, decomposition, and radioactivity. The world's oil deposits were created, as were tar pits, and hollowed cavities deep under the ground have filled with natural gases like methane, as the world that once was has decayed, fossilized, and became gaseous bitumen, coal, oil, or other fossil fuel byproducts. The entire pre flood world and its once thriving civilization vanished, and the topography of the world, the whole planet, was altered. It was literally turned upside down. It was this global cataclysm that caused the Earth to tilt and move its axis away from the eye of the dragon. The approach of this object, known to the ancients as Phoenix, caused massive geomagnetic disturbances and even several reversals in rapid succession as it was in direct transit between our world and the sun. As the Earth was immersed within its parabola and shadow, the gravitational attraction and interference loosened the outer layers of our world. People in terror braced themselves as they saw the stars in the daytime. Then the earth rolled, turning over to face the night side, and rolled back before Phoenix pulled away and the planet recalibrated. The equatorial equatorial bulge was created in an instant from the reshaping of the Earth's dimensions, and when it was all over, the new axis pointed at the Great Bear from the dragon, for the dragon had fallen. 55. The fact that the northern shaft the Great Pyramid points to Polaris, Great Bear, indicated to Gerald Massey over 120 years ago that the Great Pyramid was built to demonstrate the ending of the great year and the final overflow of the dragon. 56. Such a pole shift is found in the ancient text called the Book of Noah, dispersed among the writings of the Book of Enoch. These writings claim that before the flood, the world trembled violently and the earth became inclined and that destruction approached. 57. The flood ended the reign of the dragon, which could no longer control the destinies of mankind. The Noahic flood was not the cause, but an effect of powerful interplanetary dynamics. This other planet, not one that travels the plane of the ecliptic like the others, but seen in 1764 AD by astronomer Hoffman as it passed over a fifth of the sun's surface in a partial transit and was seen by people all over Europe with the naked eye. Hoffman noted that it traveled on a north to south trajectory passing over the ecliptic. This rogue planet on its 138-year orbit has been seen many times and is the topic of When the Sun Darkens. When Phoenix transited, it compromised the fragile mesosphere that once protected the Earth, a high-altitude water canopy that deflected harmful radioactive particles while creating a wonderful global greenhouse. This water vapor canopy, similar to that like Venus's, collapsed and fell to the Earth, causing the flood. Genesis is very clear that prior to the flood, the entire world was watered in the morning and evening by a thick mist that emerged from the ground, and that rain was unknown. The collapse of this mesosphere also caused the drastic decrease in human longevity from centuries to decades. Coupled with this was a decreased metabolic rate due to vitamin and mineral deficient foods due to the infiltration of harmful radioactive particles from the sun that the former mesosphere shielded away. Because of the reign of the dragon, the world had become inferior. It tilted like a pillar falling, and the heavens, stars, and planets withdrew from Earth visually because the water vapor canopy that had been there magnifying the heavens was now gone. The removal of the mesosphere altered human biology to the molecular level, and even now the human genome retains junk DNA from those times before the deluge when we were biologically superior beings. The Great Bear is a constellation of 7 stars revolving around the pole, or circumpolar. What is disturbing is the fact that these stars in no way conform to the shape of a bear, but the association to a bear animal was universal among the ancients. 61. These 7 stars were a symbol of initiation into the holy mysteries of the heavenly ascent of the soul. 62. As the ascent of the soul was required for resurrection, the link to the bear may be due to its hibernation trait during the winter, a type of death during the dead part of the year. The bear emerges in the spring as the cold dissipates in a type of rebirth. It was said long ago that the bear kept watch in the stellar stories. 63. However, as will be shown, the older beliefs are quite different as to the identity of these stars. Hindu legends claim that there exists a place on earth where the Lord of Time dwelt upon a transcendent mountain that had a summit that glowed like a tongue of fire at sunset, Great Pyramid with crystal top stone, and towards where the 7 stars of the Great Bear turned their eyes. 64. In old India, they were called the 7 rishis, 7 powerful and ancient wise rulers in humanity's distant past that were known as the 7 sons of the Dragon of Wisdom. 65. Max Mueller interprets rishi to be derived from a root meaning to shine. Before the flood, there was a dynasty remembered by the Sumerians as the 7 kings. These wicked rulers began their dominion after the departure of Enoch, and they were personally responsible for creating the insane conditions and corruption that led to the judgment of God that resulted with the Great Flood. This is the subject matter of Descent of the Seven Kings. The link to the bear may have been due to a phonetic corruption among the nations of antiquity, possibly spanning back as far as the Babel Holocaust. There is evidence that an initial vowel has been worn off of rishis. Originally, the word was ara, ar eshas. The idea behind the star group was not that of a bear, but of the plowing of the dawn. These seven stars were identified as seven plowing oxen, 67. Phonetically, the word bear is the same as boer, or father of light. In fact, most of the elder languages had the sound of the word bear equivalent to the words for either light or fire. The Latin ursa, bear, resolves into se, fire and light. Resolves, yeah. And the Sanskrit riksha, as in rishis, expands into isha, or fire of the great Isha. Riksha means bear, 68. These seven stars represented the gate of heaven, and for this reason do we find in Egypt depictions of a ladder tipped so as to point to the seven stars of the Great Bear, 69. This faith in the divine entrance to the heavens may be why the oldest nations referred to the seven stars as the sheepfold, 70. As pastoral societies, early man envisioned the afterlife as a state of perpetual perfection where he no longer had to worry about mundane needs such as food and protection from enemies. Things taken care of by the shepherd of the flock. And this is the mystery between the dragon and his enemy, the shepherd, embodied within the faces and corners of the antechamber, king's chamber, and shafts. Below the king's chamber, or chamber of man's inheritance, lies the place come to be known as the queen's chamber. No extravagant grand gallery or antechamber system leads into this largely unremarkable chamber. There are two shafts that penetrate through 260 feet of stone, but they do not point at any obvious star groups. As the king's chamber concerns the incredible destiny of humankind and their redemption, the lower chamber concerns the other sentient beings in the creation, the orders of angels known by many names like archons, decans, principalities, cherubim, watchers, guardians, and seraphim. What was meant for angelic comprehension was not intended for human comprehension. The angels came before us, and entry into the Queen's chamber does not require the traveling up through historical timelines, Grand Gallery, Antechamber, King's Chamber. The histories of the angelic orders are far more complex than the simplified explanations by theologians. Long prior to the creation of mankind, the angels were a part of an extensive civilization, multidimensional, with our own solar system being the epicenter of government. The long-held misconception of men crowned in halos with white feathery wings and white gowns is a fiction. Angels are trans-dimensional beings able to transcend our fourth-dimensional reality because they are fifth-dimensional intelligences, allowing them to move beyond both space and time. They have passions, allegiances, orders, and have the capacity to disobey them as well. The orders of the angelic hosts have taken sides in a primordial dispute between the Godhead and the first created archangel, and this led to a devastating war that destroyed planets and billions of life forms, all long before anything was ever introduced into the creation called man. Our Earth is very old, with a rich history though in the span of planetary antiquities, humanity is an infant. Humankind was never meant to be. The Godhead made man in his image, having an immortal soul, but his body was designed merely as a vessel. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber is necessary because mankind was given over to death on earth, a scheme designed by his enemies, those angelic entities that rebelled and thought to make war against God through his signature creation. Though the angels were created in the beginning and were never initially subjected to death, being a biological phenomenon, by their own choice did they cast their lots, lose a war, and now await the very fate they had initially planned for mankind, death. Though judgment has been delayed, it has already been declared. That the sarcophagus is empty reveals that one had already sacrificed himself for his flock. There are some who would object to this analysis on the basis that the angels came first and their own chamber was underneath that designated for mankind. Yeah, the Great Pyramid is prophetic architecture and alludes to that which will be, not the state of things that are. Angelic beings indeed have deserved a status much higher than those who came later, than humans on earth, and scripturally the angels are described as greater in power and might. But this was by God's design. The story of the prodigal son is about disobedient mankind going out in the world in defiance of the Father, while the other brother, angels, stayed with the Father and did everything he was supposed to. This parable was for the angels. When the defiant son returned and begged to enter his father's house, the father had a great party and feast, gave him a robe and ring, and was elated with his return. The faithful brother informed the father that he had never received these things, but the father replied that it had always been that they were together, but his brother who was lost had now returned. It is difficult for people to grasp how humans could be regarded more highly to God than his own angels, because people are unaware of the truly astonishing inheritance the redeemed shall receive in the eternal future. According to the New Testament records, while on earth we are a little lower than the angels, however, in our resurrected, glorified, and powerful bodies, we will be made in the likeness of Christ, receiving an eternal inheritance greater than that of the angels. In fact, Paul wrote that we will be put into a position to judge angels, 71. Angelic beings were the first sons of God, but some of them fell in distant antiquity, falling from their first estate and became evil terrestrial entities bent on corrupting mankind. Those among men who believe on him shall receive the spirit of adoption, also becoming sons of God. Created in his image, we receive a higher divine status, which is reflected in the internal architectural features of the Great Pyramid. What information is blind to us is evident to the angels. The air shafts of the Queen's chamber are mysterious to us, but we do not know what revelations they contain for angelic beings, luminaries that, according to the Genesis account, were created to be signs to those of us on the earth. 72. In the book of Enoch, we find this a possibility. Concerning the passing of the night sky, Enoch wrote, I bless the Lord of glory, who made those great and splendid signs, stars, that they might display the magnificence of his works to angels and to the souls of men, and that these might glory in all his works and operations, might see the effects of his powers, might glorify the great labor of his hands, and bless him forever. 73. We cannot deny that the angelic mind is one of an ancient intelligence with a memory spanning many millennia, perhaps eons before the creation of Homo sapiens, and most likely with the capability of instant recall. Memory for an angelic entity would not be biologically based with the neural restrictions we possess. What information concerning their own destinies may never be known among men, but evidence that our predecessors partially knew of these secrets is found in several Enochian passages. Further, Old Hebrew traditions link angels with the Pyramid Esoterica in that they told that the number of angels that originally fell from heaven and deliberately descended to earth assuming human-like bodies was 520. And these 520 angelic beings took the daughters of men. This 520 is a duplication of the pyramid exterior angle of 52 by a factor of the pyramid number 10. These angels lusted for human females and sexual experiences and crossed a spiritual barrier that could not be breached once passed through. These angels are forever lost and continually interfere in the affairs of men, maddened with rage and fear. Judgment declared, but delayed. Mankind, as redeemed, is offered the opportunity to pass through this spiritual threshold and take up the offices of those that had disobeyed, inheriting these positions through divine adoption. Over a century ago, various scholars and translators of Near Eastern texts were of the uniform opinion that the ancients believed that humanity was specifically created to fill in the gap left behind from the defection of the innumerable angels who were banished, 74. One of these intriguing finds was the Babylonian Revolt in Heaven tablet, which reads, to those rebel gods, angels, he prohibited return. He stopped their service. He removed them unto the gods who were his enemies. In their room he created mankind. 75. Such also was the teaching of the Gnostics, who held that mankind would only replace those archons, deacons, and principalities that rebelled, becoming a part of the inheritance of the height. 76. This is none other than a reference to the Great Pyramid, the mysteries of resurrection embodied within its design.